Honorable Ola Almgren, UN Resident Coordinator, Mr. Andrew Keene, entrepreneur and author, Dr. Fabian Tobe Dairit of the National Academy of Science and Technology, our honorable mayors, Isko Moreno of Manila, Joy Belmonte of Quezon City, Benjamin Magalong of Baguio, Marcelino Teodoro of Marikina, Maria Ressa, CEO and Executive Editor of Rappler, John Neri of the Philippine Daily Inquirer and the Democracy and Disinformation Consortium, other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to De La Salle University. I'm delighted to be among you here at this Philippine Social Good Summit. Yesterday, we had our University General Assembly to mark the start of another academic year. I took the opportunity to exhort members of our community, especially our faculty, to rise to the challenge of lifelong learning and to model it for our students. The disruptions all around us, wrought globally by the Fourth Industrial Revolution and locally by a once-in-a-generation reform in higher education, demand nothing less. It's occurred to me that a lifelong commitment to learning, but also to unlearning or relearning, may also give us a fighting chance against the unprecedented and existential crisis we face and which we will be discussing today. I don't think I need to use alarmist language to convey the urgency of our environmental conditions in the Philippines or the level of outrage that can be unleashed during the most ordinary interactions on social media. Our Yormes in the House only need to show you their Twitter feeds from the past week, whether it's hashtag walang pasok or hashtag walang mayor. Within them, you will find all the evidence you need of a climate crisis in the Philippines and of the futile and needless online toxicity that prevents us from finding smart, humane, and sustainable solutions. So in these few minutes, allow me to present, one, a string of possible approaches for dealing with some aspects of the climate crisis. Two, the prospects for collaborative solutions. And three, how we may, as Rappler puts it, burst through filter bubbles and echo chambers of cyberspace. I hope that these brief points will push our discussion forward, invite commentary, and provide some context for our speakers this afternoon. First, I would suggest that the decades-old dispute about climate change, that is, does it exist, and if so, is it anthropogenic or driven by industrial emissions of carbon, etc., is looking more and more dated. In the last few years, the wider, more systemic consequences of a petroleum-based economy have emerged in ways that are far more immediate and hit more of us much closer at home. One word, microplastics. Even if we were to grant that the rise in average global temperatures is simply a part of a long-term cycle of warming stretching back hundreds of years, and therefore we are not responsible, we will not be able to make the same argument about plastics, another product of a petroleum-based economy. Specifically, microplastics of the sort have been found in 95% of our tea bags, in most of our tinned food, within our water supply from our laundry, furniture, and industrial processes. Even an ordinary kilogram of sea salt has been found to contain over 600 microplastics. For too long, we have siloed problems and considered them and their solutions in isolation. I would suggest that part of the lifelong learning of citizenship ought to include becoming better at systems thinking, how the parts of a system, such as the economy or the environment, relate to each other, how they perform over time, and how they interact with larger systems. We can sensitize ourselves and others to this in our exchanges, in the same way that we now talk about wellness, not just health, or how we talk about national happiness or life satisfaction, not just GDP, gross domestic product. Second, technology is surely going to be part of our toolkit for mitigating environmental crises or adapting to them. Yet the question has always been, will technological solutions scale up sufficiently? Will they be accessible to the most vulnerable and the least able to pay? Another approach is to facilitate the movement towards better collaborative use of common resources. Some economists are calling this the commons. That means, for example, pasture, farm, or coastlands, riverways, the sea, the forests, as well as, for our mayors, parking areas and sidewalks, which are considered common. As we wait and see, I urge you to consider the work of the late Elie Ostrom, Nobel Prize winner in economics, who showed not just how most environmental problems at their core are problems of managing common resources, but who set out key principles that have stood local communities in good stead for hundreds of years. Her suggestion, number one, define clear group boundaries. Number two, match the rules for governing resources to local needs and conditions. The rules related to local needs and conditions. Number three, ensure that those affected by the rules can participate in modifying them. Number four, make sure the rule-making rights of communities are respected by outside authorities, rather than for outside authorities to impose rules on the local communities. Number five, developing a monitoring system that is carried out by the community members themselves. A good example of this is, of course, dealing with replanting or reforesting. If there is no local community to take care of the new plants, they will die, or they will be used for firewood. So there has to be a monitoring system that depends on the local communities for implementation. Number six, use graduated sanctions for violators. Number seven, provide accessible, low-cost means of dispute resolution. And eight, spread norms of responsibility from the lowest to the highest levels. I don't know if this sounds more for what the barangays can do. Probably our mayors can look at that. Finally, a word on the troubled landscape of social media, polarization, discord, and so on. I'm not that active on social media, so I cannot offer you a wealth of experience. But I offer some insights from social psychologists. Perhaps you've heard of the phrase contact hypothesis, the notion that getting to know each other can reduce prejudice between groups. It turns out that there are stricter conditions that must be met for this to work, and this has implications on the way we organize and raise consciousness. The contact must be sustained. It must be with more than one member of a group. It must include a genuine exchange of ideas. and ideally between individuals of similar social rank. What comes across to my mind was when EDSA happened, I happened to be there at the corner of Ortigas and EDSA. And as the tanks came in, the civilians who were coming in were urged, go and talk to the soldiers. The young ladies offered them a rose or a flower, talk to them. The idea was very simple. If they see you as human beings, the less likely they will fire on you. That is what it means to increase the contact between groups and sustain it and bring it up to an exchange of ideas and so on. They have also suggested perspective thinking or perspective taking, really to incorporate what the other side is undergoing in order to understand where they are coming from. I don't mean, of course, for schools, this does not mean just adding a new lecture or 3 more units, structured activity for students to experience the world of others. No, it can be as simple as asking students to draw up a family budget and make choices based on the income level, not only of their family, but an unskilled worker or a BPO worker, as some of our professors in economics have done. Research shows that attitude changes from these brief interventions are surprisingly persistent. Steven Pinker, one of the world's foremost public intellectuals, has reflected on how reading stories written from the perspective of slaves may have been instrumental in finally generating public support for the abolition of slavery. I think I've said enough, at least to get us started. Based on our program this afternoon, this should be intense but an invigorating forum. Once again, it's my pleasure and the part of De La Salle University to participate in this Social Good Summit. Whether our lives have been short or long, may they always be filled with learning. Thank you and welcome to all.